Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to talk about recognizing when a rewrite is failing. So, Isaac, when is a rewrite failing? I mean, to me, it's the first day.
That's a good question. I think that's kind of, I imagine it's tricky for a lot of people because if you're in the middle of a rewrite, but you think it's going well, maybe you don't know that it's failing, or you think it's going well because you're making what feels like progress because
Mm-hmm.
you are writing code, you see the new system, you're excited, and there's like all of the. I think we talked about this in an older episode where the last it was like a moving metaphor where like the last bits of it you have to just kind of like slam everything and pack it and move it over.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely, we've had the metaphor of like you start off, you pack everything really nicely, and then
Yeah,
you get rid of things as you go along, and then at the end, you just start throwing everything in a box, knowing that some of the stuff you're going to throw out after you paid to move it because you just don't have time anymore to
so you
figure it
could be.
out.
It's exciting right at the beginning of the rewrite. That's what
Mm-hmm.
is in the siren song, right? Excited because you're thinking it's gonna go really well this time, or
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, and you're gonna get to use all these new tools. And then I imagine at some point you realize, okay, this is taking a lot longer than we thought it was, or people were getting impatient, or this was trickier than we thought it was because we just encountered some legacy functionality that, this kind of blows our scope there. So at some
Well, it
point,
also probably blows out your model.
mhm,
Yeah, to me, the first sign that things are not going well is rewrites usually start with a long period where there's no deadline, there's nothing delivered. You're building
mhm,
these new things, as you say, it's all new stuff. None of it's in production. Nobody has any expectations about, like, it's going to all be delivered at once or at the end. And nobody's asking about the incremental delivery or when this thing is going to be ready because it's an everything. It's an all or, very
yeah,
much an all or nothing kind of proposition. And so the first sign that a rewrite is failing is you're approaching that initial, whatever the initial, we're going to have this thing rewritten date is,
mhm,
and you don't have it all rewritten. Like that's your first big, well, but like you're not close,
yeah.
right? You
Like at
thought
the
you would be
halfway
close,
mark, you're like, okay, well, we're halfway done, and or we're halfway to the deadline, and we're
right?
not halfway done, or even close.
Right. Or if you don't even know how done you are,
Mm, okay.
because in my head, like one of the things I see repeatedly in rewrites is, let's say you've got a report generator. It's a common thing that gets rewritten, and it's terrible, and it's really hard to make new reports. And so you say, "Hey, we're going to rewrite the report generator," and you spend all this time lovingly handcrafting the new report generator, and it makes awesome reports, and the reports are beautiful, and you can build a new one in minutes instead of hours or days, and that's all great. But now you have to backport the existing 100 or 200,000
Right.
million reports that you've written in the past that people are still using, or maybe are still using, or you discover you have no idea if they're using them, and
Hmm.
you have no observability into that. And so that's when you begin the slog of trying to figure. But like, if you don't know that going in, right? So you're like, oh well, it's 2/3 of the way through the project. We've built this new amazing report generator, and people are like, great. When are all the reports going to be moved over? You're like, whoa, hold on a second here.
Is that more
That's
of just a failure of not including that in the original planning of said rewrite?
yes, but it's a sign that you're now failing.
Hmm.
To me, you're failing day one because you've decided to do a rewrite. So
True.
the first sign that the rewrite is failing is that you're on a rewrite. It's a tautology. But the
Excellent.
to an external person, the idea of, oh, you've got this disconnect between the new system and migrating all of the things that the old system did.
Yeah.
Right? You've fallen into this framework building trap.
Okay. So what's another sign that your rewrite's failing?
You don't have any migration plan.
Hmm.
So current users are using the old system, the original system. You've got this new system that you think is going to solve all the problems, and it's going to be perfect. And unless there's a strangler fig in the middle somewhere, you need some kind of migration plan. And even then, you need a migration plan.
Yeah.
But there has to be some kind of, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to switch this. We're going to switch that. These things are going to happen. There's an order. And if that hasn't been thought of, and you're more than, say, a third of the way through the project, that's a big problem. Because inevitably, you're going to need support and time from other teams, and you're going to have to ask them for it. And they're going to have to schedule you in.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, hey, tomorrow we're flipping the switch and you need to change your endpoints. You need to talk to us over here. And the format's different.
And this is kind of an interesting distinction too, but especially with my call out earlier about this being part of the original planning. If you wanted to rewrite in the when we don't, but the way we distinguish that from the thesis shipping model, or this essentially this iterating or this strangler fig pattern, is from the beginning. If you do have that migration plan that you're talking about, and you're already having those conversations with teams, then you know which parts are going to get migrated over first. You can actually break them into pieces into having like, okay, we'll strangle these endpoints, and then we have a plan with each different team on when we're going to cut over these endpoints, and we can support that seamless cutover while keeping the current system still delivering until everything's seamlessly moved. And that's your iterative pattern there. So to invert it, the first way to correctly refactor a system without falling into the rewrite trap would be to have this migration plan and these conversations with teams before you get too excited about all the other architecture aspects that the engineering mind might go to. Like, oh, we're going to have access to this and that and that. Before that, let's just talk to the teams and see if we were to break this into pieces, what is the best way to deliver it with the teams?
Right. And that's one of the pieces that usually doesn't get planned out ahead of time, because if you could scope out that iterative, that incremental piece that, what are my commitments to other people and how could I fulfill them, it would push you away from a rewrite.
Right.
So there's a third, and we're going through the internal signs first. Like, these are the signs that you as somebody on a team doing a rewrite would notice that are problematic. So the third sign is your team morale starts dropping. So as you said, when you start a rewrite, it's fun, it's awesome, you're building this new stuff, it's greenfield, and you're doing all this great stuff, you're building all these new frameworks and all these tools, and then you get down, you've made all the decisions, like the pace will always slow down because you've made all the cool decisions, you've done all the cool new things, and now you need to grind through all of the features.
Yep. All the hard work becomes very apparent.
Right.
I bet it's similar to the Sonos issue, right? Where you have to support like suddenly product or whoever was making the bad decision then realizes, oh, if we do this, we're gonna cut off support for all these legacy users because we only support these new systems or whatever. And then when you realize, oh, we can't support it without this, that, and that, and suddenly you're like, oh well, screw it, let's just forget about them and cut everything over.
Yeah,
and we'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
That's terrible, right? And then I think they said that at Sonos the engineers were warning them like this is not going to work, and they were ignored. That's a morale hit. Calling out, hey, this is going to be a disaster, and being ignored is certainly one. And even being part of the big, exciting rebranding or the courageous rebrand, and it completely failing is a pretty big morale hit too.
Yes. Well, I was going even further back. Like, to use a physical building analogy, there's, if we're talking physical buildings, there's literally architects, and they do the architecture, and then there is much, much more labor put into actually building the physical building than is put in by the architects. The architects drop the plan, and then dozens or hundreds of people actually go out and physically build the thing, and the architect supervises. And one of the traps, the morale traps in a rewrite is developers tend to think the architecture work is the most fun, and you get to do it first. And then you switch hats, you stop being the architect and you start being the construction worker. And this is, just the normal case. This isn't like anything weird or strange is happening here. You take off your architect hat and you put on your construction worker hat and you now go build the system. And most developers think that's less fun. Mm-hmm. And with a rewrite, there's a secondary problem of all of those features. You didn't know exactly how they worked in the first place, which is part of why the original system was so terrible that you needed to rewrite it. Now you have to go back and figure that out. And so the rewrite will always bog down. After you've done all the fun stuff, you're deep into the slog of actually building this thing. And now you need to go back and dive deep into the original system that you hate.
Yeah.
So that you can figure out how the new system is supposed to work.
That's I think the main, to me, that's like the most telling problem of the rewrite is that you're inevitably going to discover something that you didn't realize you had to port, because the whole reason, like you're saying, that you're rewriting to begin with is because you're like, this one sucks, I don't understand it, this new one will be better. Mm-hmm. The only way to understand the old system is to go through and look at the old system and try to figure out what it's doing or talk to people who were originally working on it. But the main thing is documenting and testing the old system. And that is completely the self-defeating aspect of the rewrite. If you will just go through, document, and test and fix the old system, there's no point in rewriting the old one. And you always will have to do that work, even if you try to rewrite it, unless you just want to disregard and not port over everything and leave it half-baked. And then customers will get pissed off at you, hence like the Sonos part where you just swap over.
Sonos lost
$500
million in value.
Right. I don't understand how to do any of this. We can't support them. Let's just screw it. Let's just cut over. Right. then your CEO resigns and you lose $500 million. Right. And then you take a huge brand hit, and then your customers are furious at you. Yeah. Or do the work to begin with, dive through your legacy code, document, better understand it. And then again, like if you just do that original work, mm-hmm. so much of the want and incentive to rewrite just disappears. With good test coverage, good documentation, go through, discover with your old, and also then you can spread that knowledge too to mm-hmm. to the rest of your team. You've got your nice Confluence document explaining why this feature is the way it is, why the customer IDs are hard-coded for 3 different customers, that kind of thing.
Right, and this is somewhere where AI shines. You can have it mm-hmm. explain most of the code, and you don't need to write the documentation anymore. And you only need to answer questions like, why are these 3 customers hard-coded?
Yeah.
And AI can tell you all the rest. And it only is the illogical things in there that just don't make any sense that you need to actually document.
Yep. I think where people get hung up on, or here's my guess at least, is they'll go, there's this old thing here that's not working right. I don't understand it. How about we do this instead? The basic concept of what our feature is for campaign sending, the basic concept is we should send emails. That's really what we should be thinking of. Let's just disregard all this other messy logic that happened there before. What we really are is just an email sending feature. Let's just build a really nice, clean email sending feature, and we'll start with just sending some emails, right? And then you go, oh, wait, there's so much there. Yes. There's a reason it was complicated. I wanted to simplify it for my own sake because it should be so simple, and it's not. And it's like almost spitting in the face of all the people who put the complexity in there to begin with to support those customers. But you really just wanted to simplify everything because it just doesn't make sense. But you got to do the work to go back through and understand why it was that complicated.
Right. If your thought is that the original developer, there's an arrogance to a lot of rewrites that the original developers didn't know what they were doing, and you can do it so much better.
Yeah.
And that arrogance is almost always unfounded.
Yeah. And I know it's very fun to make fun of. I've fallen into that with a lot of people where you look at old code and you're like, this is terrible code. Who would do it this way? You
me
would.
6 months ago.
Yeah, he totally would.
Younger me. Didn't know what the heck he was doing, man.
Not even just younger, but like you under pressure from the company, under budget constraints, under all kinds of reasons, or you might even just be told, like that commit might just be your boss telling you, you need to do it this way. I'm telling you to do it this way, even though it's terrible. And you're like, fine, okay. Boss says to do it. And then you're trying to blame somebody. Oh, this person should have been smarter than that. Maybe they were. Maybe they were just told to do it. And this is just what you had to do. There's 1,000 reasons why it was the way it was.
I usually, instead of my boss, I usually blame legal in those kinds of examples. Legal said it has to be this way. And because I can argue with my boss, I can't argue with legal. Legal says, this is the regulation. This is how it has to be. And you're like,
yeah.
Okay,
that's a stupid legal precedent, but I have to do it. Okay.
But like, yeah, sure, I have no argument there. Like, and in those cases, I always put in the comment, like, this is written this way because legal says it has to work this way. Because the next developer, because the next developer is going to look at that and be like, "That's stupid. Why are we doing that? Let's fix it." Like, no, don't fix it. It's not broken.
Right. And then 10 years from then, when you're not at that company anymore, somebody else is looking at the code, sees your name, and is like, "Isaac Askew, this is the dumbest developer I've ever seen."
Yes,
it's not like really. Again, it's an arrogance. There's a reason it was that way.
And occasionally, there are reasons. Like, I've looked at some very old code, because languages evolve, and I've looked at some. If you get code that's like more than a decade old, you're like, "Oh, there's a much better way to do this. Why didn't they do this?" Oh, well, 10 years ago there wasn't this much better way.
Yeah,
it's not that they didn't know better. It's that's
10 years
the way
is a
you
long time for technology.
Yeah. And so then you might be able to rewrite it, but it's not because the original developers were dumb. It's because the tools got better.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 internal ways that you would notice a rewrite is failing. That's your deadline is approaching, you're not done, you don't have a migration plan, and your team morale is falling. There's one big external way that you know that rewrite is failing, and that is leadership or management outside of your team starts asking for status updates.
Oh boy.
All right. The higher up, in most companies, the leadership will say, "Okay, yes, you've got the time, you've got the resources, go do your rewrite." And they've delegated. They're not really asking deep probing questions. It's like, your manager goes to the status meeting and they says, "Yep, everything's green," and somebody writes on a spreadsheet green, and then all of a sudden it's not going to be green. And this is actually, it's part of Mythical Man Month. A project gets late one day at a time, but it will become suddenly apparent to leadership and externally that it's late. And the reaction is always to jump in and start micromanaging the team.
Which probably just makes it even later.
It's a big flag, but also it kills a lot of your performance because now you're spending all this time producing stuff for people external to the team to make decisions about how you're doing. And because a rewrite is just all work in progress, it's very hard, almost impossible for anyone who doesn't have full context to understand how things are going. If, going back to the rewrite report analogy, or report example, it's not an analogy. If you say, "Oh, well, I've got all these features in this report," the report generator now does all these things, that really doesn't tell them how close you are to getting all 100 reports migrated. It says, "Oh, well, okay, they have this feature done." And so you work hard, but there's no context, there's no ability to judge your progress externally. And so the more leadership comes in and asks questions. And some of the early ones are probably good. Like, "Hey, I want a demo every week." It's like, "Oh, cool. You guys should have been doing that anyway, almost likely. But something to show progress every week. A demo is great. That's not a huge problem. But then a demo becomes a status update. And I need you to come meet with me every week. And I need
that morale hit from the third example of how they're starting to fail. That morale hit gets even worse. I imagine all the micromanaging when you just have tanking morale at that point. Just, free fall.
Yes. Developers love being asked probing questions by leadership.
Daily.
Daily. Yeah. It's daily status updates, leadership coming to your stand getting moved so it fits in leadership schedule. Seen all that.
Yeah.
All of that's morale killing. all of it's a big sign that you're in trouble.
Yeah. All right.
I
Any
think
other
that's
thoughts
it.
there? Okay.
Uh, Thank you all for listening. And if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, hit the like button, do all the things. We appreciate it.
Rate us 5 out of 5 stars or 10 out of 10 or whatever. And then
Yeah.
go to YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel too. We also publish this as a video format. If you're only a listener, you can be a listener and a watcher.
Awesome. Thank you all. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.